Right.
There's listening, like I'm sure you listen to podcasts and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And you're usually out doing something in your yard, or you're cleaning up in here,
Yeah.
or...
And it's actually kind of funny though when I hear a podcast that I hear something in the background, and they don't really notice it, but they do kind of notice it. It's kind of realistic. It feels like it's like
Yes.
that's like it should be. It should be
Yeah.
realistic. It should have like this in the background because it's it's so freeing. It's a podcast.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like almost like okay, they're human.
Yeah.
Unlike the Joe Rogan podcast,
which is in a sanitized box.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything's perfect.
Yeah.
But I'll get to that point one day. But until then, I think I'm okay with this. Hey, thank you for watching another episode of Well, That's Something podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hilton. He came back, George Jared. Thank you for coming back on, man. I really do appreciate it.
No problem.
So, like, you were talking to the I-40 bridge.
Yes.
At the gym.
Yes.
Dude, this guy, this inspector, man, he's going to be...
Oh, he's in
big trouble.
Yeah, he's looking at potential federal charges. When you take a job like that, it's like when you're inspecting a federal bridge and they're using federal dollars.
Yeah.
A bridge like that, you can be criminally liable if something happens. And that bridge, 40% of the load-bearing capacity of that bridge was on that beam, and it was fractured. So it was just a time bomb waiting to fall into the Mississippi River.
Yeah, and they were saying that this has been like a big crack for a while now. They were looking at pictures from 2016.
The bare minimum is 2019. They did a drone.
Yeah.
They actually used a drone they were studying the cable structure of a bridge, and during a 5-hour video, they captured about 2 seconds of the drone going by the spot where the fracture happened.
Yeah.
And it's there. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So they know from 2019 now. A couple days ago, Kayaker has released pictures to the Associated Press, and the Kayaker shows that the crack is starting to form in the beam in 2016. They've not been able to authenticate it, but at the same time, I don't know if the guy's telling the truth or not. I'm sure he probably is.
Yeah.
For sure.
What was he saying? Is that the guy that was supposed to be inspecting?
No, just the kayaker.
Oh, the kayaker.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Somebody could just come up with a picture and say,
now,
hey.
if somebody's on the river can see that, that's saying something else.
Under the bridge.
And you said that tugboat guys were driving underneath there and seeing
they
it?
saw it. Yeah, they knew it was there. I'm speculating now because I haven't talked to them yet, but I'm assuming that they just thought it was a part of the maintenance of the bridge. Seeing this crack getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
No.
But it's nuts though that I'm gonna ask you. You said that the FBI got involved.
Yeah.
So why are they involved? Because it's federal.
It's a federal. Okay. It's an interstate bridge because it connects 2 states.
Gotcha.
And so, and kind of how the process is inspecting that bridge is paid for through federal dollars. So the inspector works for the state of Arkansas, but he's paid with federal funding. Because they want to keep all these interstate bridges safe. Mm-hmm. And so that's how the FBI can potentially get involved because it's an interstate bridge. It's an interstate commerce issue.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not saying the guy will get charged with a crime, but Lori Tudor, who is the director of the Arkansas Department of Transportation, she said Tuesday, she said this guy's under investigation now.
Yep.
So, and he actually inspected 9 other bridges that are now having to be reevaluated in the last year.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That in Arkansas or
in Arkansas?
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
But that's nuts.
They're supposed to inspect those bridges inch by inch.
Yeah. And every year, right?
Every year. Yeah. There's no way to miss it.
So did he have a chance to say anything yet? Did he say
they haven't even identified who he is yet. Now I'm sure by now a lot of people know who he is.
Yeah.
It's going to get around.
Oh yeah.
It'll eventually we'll all know who he is.
Yeah.
And he'll have that. He'd been an employee there for over 15 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, my thinking of that is just do you get tired of your job sometimes? I wonder if maybe he was really good at it, and then over time he's just man, I'm so good, I really don't need this. I did this last year, we're fine. I just wonder about people's mentality when it comes to either being lazy or just because it's such a safety issue. It's you're putting people's lives in danger by not doing your job.
Yeah.
So when does that come into effect of I really need to do this. I need to inspect this, like you said, inch by inch, because I could potentially people could be killed.
Yeah. Well, it's even the loss of life component's a big one.
Yeah.
But now what you're having an economic component. It's costing the truck industry $2.4 million a day
because they can't use that.
Because they can't use that bridge. Because what happens is they get
time is money.
It is.
Yep.
You know, I saw a statistic where the average travel time for a big rig truck was around 9 minutes going through West Memphis into Memphis, you know, like getting onto those interstates and moving on. It's now up to 84 minutes on average.
Oh, yeah.
So they're just sitting there. I was over there the other day. I sat in traffic for an hour. We just sat there. On right there in West Memphis, you can see all the businesses, you know.
Yeah.
And we're just sitting there creeping along a few inches. Yeah.
On the bridge?
No, it's before you get to the bridge because of bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Because all that traffic now is going over the I-55 bridge, which is one bridge now.
Right.
So the only if you want to get across the river at that bridge, if it wasn't there, you'd have to go down to Helena, or you'd have to go up to like Blytheville, Dyersburg, you know, that whole. So it's a major inconvenience, and it's costing us millions a day. And here's the thing that's going to come
So
out.
could this, hold on, I need to cut you off real quick. Hey, guys, if you're hearing something in the background, it's my AC. I can't turn it off. It would be really hot in here, and you would see us pass out by the halfway of the podcast. It's got to be, I'm sorry, love you guys. But anyways, I was going to say, now could have this been prevented? Could this, instead of being months now for the bridge to be shut down, if they caught it in time, could have been an easy fix?
They don't know that yet.
Okay.
What we know is this: the longer you let a fracture like that, I'll say this right now: that fracture on that bridge is unique.
Yeah.
The only time they think they don't know. They think they may have had a fracture like this was there was a much smaller version of this bridge in Florida, and it
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I'm from Florida.
Yeah, and it developed a fracture similar to this, but this is a unique situation. I'll say this: is it possible that everything would be the same? Let's say they found it in 2016 as what's happening now. Yes, it's very possible. But the likelihood, if they found it then, the likelihood of them being able to fix it quicker and cheaper is absolute. Yeah, I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Makes sense. And why is it unique? Is it just in a weird spot?
It's not even, I'll tell you why it's unique. This is the scary part. They don't know why this fracture formed. They still don't know. It just formed. And what I was told, and this may end up being not true, I'll caveat it with that. I talked to someone who said that they had, who talked to an engineer. They think that it's possible that the riverbed may have shifted some. And it's kind of like a paperclip. You sit there and do this with a paperclip long enough, and all of a sudden there'll be little tiny fractures that start forming along
It's
the
just like when you look at a road.
Yes.
When the earth, shifts, like it's going to crack.
It's going to crack. I mean, you wiggle it enough, and the cracks start forming, and then wherever the primary pressure point, that's the scary part about this bridge. The primary pressure point is where that's where the paperclip will separate. Is at the primary pressure point of the pulling and tugging.
Okay.
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that the load-bearing part of the bridge is where this fracture formed.
Yeah.
So it's scary.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, also too, what about for ships that are going underneath it? Are they being redirected?
No, actually, a week ago, they had shut down traffic completely along the river.
Yeah.
About a week ago, they determined that they could safely let barges pass underneath it.
Okay.
So they flushed out all the barges. But I mean, again, going back to our economic thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so all that barge traffic goes all over the world. It ships products all over the world.
Yeah.
When you slow down the Mississippi River, any way, shape, or form, you are slowing the movement of goods, and when you slow the movement of goods, things are going to cost more when you go to the store.
Right.
That's the net effect to the average consumer.
Yeah.
So when you see prices going up, understand that it's because of that bridge. It doesn't matter if you live in Arkansas or Tennessee or Louisiana, or if you live in Oregon or California.
Yeah.
That bridge that borders Arkansas and Tennessee and Mississippi.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's the most traveled bridge, or I believe it's the most traveled river in the world.
Yeah. That's crazy. And it's a river. I mean, large boats can go on there.
Yeah, a lot of big crops, products. I mean, there's just so much that's moved up and down that river. It's crazy.
That is crazy. I had one scary incident one time. We're in an RV, and we were coming back from the beet harvest in Minnesota, and there was some sketchy bridge we had to go over with my truck in the RV. And this thing weighs 9,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember it was a pretty steep hill up, like going up the bridge. It's steep, but it was an older bridge.
Yeah.
So, and I felt it was like, how you can sit. Okay, where Marionberry is, that road over there. When you sit there, you can feel you can feel it shake when cars are, and we started feeling that when we were going up.
Yeah.
And so like, oh Lord, there we go. This is it. But dude, that scared the crap out of me. That and that other time, I know I'm doing RV stories here now, but we took a shortcut in Branson, and there was my truck can only pull like 9,000 pounds, right? I'm topping it with this thing. So in Branson, I'm sure you've been there.
Oh yeah.
Steep hills going up that. Dude, I thought my truck was gonna explode. Like my transmission was like, and I was like, oh my god. I'm like white knuckling it. My wife's like, you okay? I'm like, I'm good. Oh, that's what I want to talk to you about. Sorry, CrimeCon. That's coming up in next month, 2 weeks. So what you're opening it now?
Yes.
So what does that mean?
What that means is
And where is this? I'm sorry.
It's in Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Right.
And what it means is that like they'll start at like noon.
Yeah.
And then they'll we're on at around 12:10. Around just a few minutes after it opens, we're going to give an hour-long presentation. My partner and I, Jennifer Buchholz, we're going to give a presentation on Rebecca Gould's murder case. Yeah. And we.
Now, was she somebody that was with you during the whole case?
Not the entire case. Okay. What happened is obviously I covered it. I think we talked about it before. I covered it starting in 2004. I was working for a small newspaper up in the hills. And I was actually out there the day they found their body. I still got her missing poster. I told you guys all that stuff. And so I'd covered it for years. I've written about it in 3 of my books. Yep. And I've written, dozens of news articles about it for newspapers. And I think the Associated Press has picked up stories about it that I've written and all that kind of thing. And so I was in a podcast called Hell and Gone with Catherine Townsend. Catherine will actually be presenting at CrimeCon as well. Good. Because her podcast, I think it's in season 3 now, so she's done some other cases. She did another case in Arkansas, and then I believe she's doing a case in like Malibu, California. Really? A cold case. I haven't listened to it yet. Sorry, Catherine. I will eventually. It's on my list. But so Jennifer heard the Hell and Gone podcast about 2.5, 3 years ago. She worked at the American military, or she works. I hope I'm not butchering this. The American Military Institute or Academy. It's in Colorado Springs. She's a professor. Yeah. She had worked in counterintelligence in the U.S. Army for years and years. She worked in the medical examiner's office in New York City for a long time. Worked at the Pentagon. She's worked for the State Department. She goes overseas to do all sorts of really neat, cool stuff. Was she the one you were talking about, how she was doing the screening process over there? Yes. Okay, so it's the same. Okay. Yeah, yes. Her job in the military was, local workers in Afghanistan and Iraq will come onto bases to work. And so her job was to screen them to make sure that they weren't terrorists. And she actually wrote a book about it, which is a really great book. And so her and I she emailed me one day. She wanted to use Rebecca's case as kind of like a case study. Yeah. She's also working on I think she's a licensed private investigator too, so that's kind of like a side gig for her that she does. And so she wanted to study the case, so her and I we started talking every day, email, exchanging that. It's funny, her husband Jesse's like, they came and stayed at my house a few weeks ago, the two of them, and he's like, man, he goes, most guys, if they knew their wife was talking to some dude on the phone for 6 hours a day, would be pretty uptight. Yeah. I said, but it's just me.
This is business, yep. Yeah. And so you guys usually talk together, like, or you bounce off each other. So I don't know, I'm kind of confused how this really kind of works. Like when you go up and talk, you both go up at the same time. You kind of bounce off each other, kind of like we'll have a PowerPoint, and what we'll do is we've divided up the subject areas. Like her range of expertise is in the analytics, like the analyzing particular parts of the crime, like why her body was moved, the angle to the blows to the girl's head because she died from blunt force trauma to the head, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of her wheelhouse. My wheelhouse in this case is I know all the characters. I've personally interviewed all of them. Yeah. I was there from the day her mom handed me the missing poster, so I can give that on the ground. And I've been through this like with her dad. I've known her dad for years and years, Dr. Larry Gould in Mountain Home. And we actually went to Mountain Home and filmed a piece with him. Yeah. So we'll use a little bit of that presentation. So what'll happen is we'll both be up on stage. I'll talk, she'll talk, and we'll just go back and forth. We've got it all divided out. So we're just, her and I, we're a pretty cohesive team, so it'll work out. That's cool. Yeah. I was going to say too, with this case that you did, what were the emotions that you went through during this when you first started this case, going through it, and then how you're still kind of going through the case because it really hasn't ended. you're still talking about it. Is there any emotions that you felt or you still feel that like when you first started?
Oh, a lot of people know that I'm a longtime journalist. I've written about a lot of different murder cases through the years. I've written about everything.
Yeah.
And her case, that was, like in your life, there are like markers.
Yeah.
Professional.
Yep.
There's every now and then you come across something that's a marker. I wrote this in my first book, which is in West Memphis, which was about the West Memphis 3 case, but I wrote about her. I said this, I have never, my resume, anytime I've ever submitted a resume to a company, whenever I've worked for them over the last 2 decades, anything I've ever done professionally, her case is attached to that resume, the first story I wrote about it.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I talk, when I go and talk about cases, I always mention her case. I never met her. I don't know her.
Yeah.
She never knew me. The Sonic that she worked at, I did go there occasionally. Casey McCullough, the sort of boyfriend love interest, where she died in his house. He was a cook there. It is very possible I was there some random morning when they were both working, so I may have had that contact because I'd go there about once or twice a week. So it's not impossible, but we didn't know each other. But she has had a profound impact on my life, and it's hard to describe, but even now, almost the guy that got arrested in her murder, William Miller, which is Casey McCullough's first cousin.
Okay. Is that the newest guy that got just?
Yes.
Okay. I will get to that.
Yeah, that's the guy who got arrested. He got arrested on my birthday.
Really?
Yeah.
When was this?
It was in November.
November.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he got arrested. He was arrested in Oregon, which I used to live in Oregon.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he got arrested in a town that's just about an hour from where I used to live. Oregon's a huge state. It's like twice as big as Arkansas.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
So it is kind of ironic that the first murder case I ever wrote about, the dude got arrested on my birthday 16 years later, and it's in Oregon, where I used to live.
So what was the hardest part, like emotionally? What was the hardest part for you?
The hardest part, okay, so...
I'm an emotional guy. I like talking about stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I cry about everything.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Hey, you can find pictures of me and Dr. Gould crying together on the internet if you want to see them.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. The hardest part for me, and it's really strange, so we've all been to funerals.
Yeah.
We've seen people who've passed on. Every now and then you come across a car wreck and you'll see something, maybe not, that just on the side of the road. So I'm a journalist. I've been doing it for 7 months. In September of 2004, when I get the call from one of her relatives that she's missing, this 22-year-old college student. So I go down to Melbourne, Arkansas, which was about 40 minutes from my office, 40 minutes, depending on traffic from my office. I go down there, the mom hands me the missing poster. So I spend the next 5 days with this family. I watch them drag Casey McCullough in for questioning. I watch them talk to another ex-boyfriend that she went out with in high school. And I see all of her family. Well, then finally, the next Monday morning, September 27th, 2004, I go out there when they find her body. And it's gruesome.
Yeah.
And it's a sunny day. I wrote about this. There were vultures in the air circling. And it's just as bad as you can. Her brain wasn't even there. Her brain had dissipated inside her skull.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's gruesome as it can possibly. There's no.
Nothing pretty.
There's no. And I always hesitate to talk about this a little bit because I found out that one of her sisters read in one of my books where I had described some of what the scene looked like. She said that she took the book and just threw it across the room and watched it just splatter against the wall. That's how hard she threw the book. So I always try to hesitate to a degree because
absolutely,
I don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
You know what you're seeing. You know what it is. There's no soft tissues left on her face. It's gone.
Yeah.
So, but that was hard. And I thought, my God, I was driving back. I was shaking. I was in my truck. I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so I get to the sheriff's department, and actually the worst part was there because her dad came up and asked me if they found his dog.
And because they haven't told him yet.
No, they haven't. They haven't told anybody. They weren't even admitting they found a body yet. And so they were waiting on I think they had a mobile lab unit, like mobile crime lab unit that they were dispatching from Little Rock to come pick her up so they could take her down to the medical examiner's office in Little Rock.
Yeah.
So they just cordoned off the area and they were just waiting for, the big dogs to show up to pick her body up. And it's so horrifying. When you read the autopsy report, it says that they pulled her body out of the bag and then they reached back in and grabbed her hair because it had already fallen off. All of her hair had just come off in one piece.
Yeah.
So it was just brutal. Well, so I had to tell her dad, and it was awful. and I'll never forget it. I mean, it's just sick to my stomach the whole time. Always wrote about her case, though. You know, it was an unsolved cold case for many years. No updates, really. Nothing happened. And then finally last year we got a new detective. They got rid of the old detective, and we got a new one, and he solved it. We think he solved at least part of it for sure for now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, my friend Jennifer went to Rebecca's grave, which is in Bradford, a couple weeks ago, and they were taking pictures, meeting up with some people who've been following the case because we were on a page about this case.
Yeah.
And she found the detective, Mike McNeil. She found his card.
Okay.
And on the back of it, he had written down, "Sorry it took so long." Yeah.
That's just one thing that's out of people's hands, especially if you're a detective and you're working on it for so long. You're probably just exerting so much energy into it, and putting hours and hours and hours and trying to find. Because I feel like if you're a good detective, you're going to take a lot of these cases to heart, and it can consume you.
Yeah.
Right?
The best ones do.
Yeah. And so you'll spend hours
and I'll tell you what case he was on. I remember Linda Collins Smith, the state senator, got murdered up in Pocahontas last year in June.
Hear about that.
Okay, well, we had a state senator who got murdered.
Really?
Yeah. And she was very well known.
Yeah.
She switched parties. She had been, in 2010, she was elected as a Democrat in Pocahontas. Well, she got into a big fight with Mike Beebe, the then governor. He gerrymandered her district to where she couldn't win re-election. I mean, if you see this district, it is unbelievable. Because 2010 they were doing the redistricting.
Okay.
And that's the process is I think it's the Attorney General of the state, the governor, and then the Secretary of State. And they're a 3-panel board, and then they decide how these districts are drawn up. Well, 2 of those 3 positions were controlled by Democrats, Mike Beebe, and I think it was Leslie McDaniel, from Jonesboro. I think he was the Attorney General at the time. So they redrew the districts all over the state, gerrymandered her district. So then she left the state. Then she switched parties. I was in the house with her when she called me up. She goes, "I'm switching parties today." I went and covered it for Jonesboro Sun and Associated Press. She switches parties, becomes a Republican. She runs for state senate and wins. Well, then, and I knew Linda. I mean, a lot of people didn't like Linda, but I did. I got along with her. She would tell me things going on at the legislature that no one was supposed to know about.
Yeah.
And so I always had a good relationship with her. I knew her for years. Well, then she makes Asa Hutchinson our current governor, and they get into it. She supports Jan Morgan, who was running against Asa in the primary.
Really?
In the Republican primary a couple years ago. So, of course, Asa's mad. So then a state senator from Batesville, or I think he was a state rep, James Sturge, he decided to run against Linda in the Republican primary, and so he won that seat. So then she was out of power, and then she got murdered. She was in the middle of a divorce, and things were going on, and then her assistant, Becky O'Donnell, who has been convicted of a murder now, murdered her, and
her assistant.
Yeah, like her campaign assistant, the person who's running her business, helping her run her business. She owned a hotel in town, and she was married to a judge, Judge Phil Smith, who I've been in his courtroom a bunch. Linda was. And they were getting divorced. Well, there was missing money, and there was all sorts of things. You know how things, when you get divorced, you start digging everybody's finances, and it's like, hey.
Never been through divorce. Hopefully, it won't happen. But yeah, I can imagine the nastiness. I mean, when I was dealing with soldiers that were going through divorce, and in the military, it was just awful.
Yeah.
It's nasty, especially if it's the soldier's fault that caught cheating. That soldier's out.
Yeah.
So it's just like, but going off of just how messy it is, it's probably 10 times worse in the Army or the military. But yeah, I can't imagine. But I was going to ask you something though. How do they find William?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
That is actually a really good question. We've been asking ourselves that a lot. I was told in July of last year that they had found some familial DNA, meaning that they had found some DNA that was related to the McCulloughs. Casey McCullough was Rebecca's sort of boyfriend. It was his house where she was found. So they had found some DNA, but they weren't sure where it came from or any of this other stuff. Well, I do know this. In September, okay, so let me set this up. So William is Casey's first cousin.
Yeah.
His mom and brother were living in Arkansas when the murders happened. What we believe is that William had come up to visit him that weekend.
So they know each other.
Oh yeah, well, okay. As much as you might know a cousin to your wife or girlfriend, you know what I mean? Kind of, you might know who they are, hi, bye, that kind of thing. So Rebecca may
my wife's cousin.
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh. Well, you need to get to know him better.
Yeah.
So
he's super cool.
Is it? That's awesome.
Yeah, keep cutting you off.
No, it's fine. So so Lynn, or the mom and the younger brother are living here. The younger brother's in school at Mount Pleasant Schools. Okay, so Rebecca vanishes, and William, in his affidavit, said that he took his S10 pickup truck, hid the truck somewhere near Casey's house, went to the door, knocked on the door, said he needed to use the phone. So he goes to, and it says in the affidavit, he's pretending like he's on the phone talking to someone. Then he goes and gets a piano leg off the piano, goes into the room and kills her. It doesn't say why he did it. It doesn't say. There's very few details given. Now, the one detail that was given that was kind of odd was the fact that he said he had an S10 pickup truck, which he did not. His cousin Casey did.
Yeah.
And Casey was at work at the time. See, that was the whole deal, is that it was Monday morning when this all goes down. Rebecca is alleged to have taken Casey to work at the local Sonic. She goes back to his house to pick up her things to get ready to go back to Fayetteville because she was in college up there.
Yeah.
And she was going to go pick her sister up in Mountain View, which is about 35, 40 minutes away as the crow flies from Melbourne to Mountain View. So she never shows up to pick her sister. They find her body a week later on the side of the road out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of on a major highway, but not a, I want to say major highway in the sense of up in Ozark Hills. Yeah. Not a major highway that anybody else is thinking of. This is a very desolate road that maybe gets mowed once a year. That's the type of highway we're talking about. Okay. So she's found out there. She's in her bra and panties. There were no signs of a sexual assault, but her body had degraded to the point where some of the signs, like maybe if there was semen or something like that, it may have degraded to the point where they couldn't find it, but there were no foreign pubic hairs. There's some telltale signs. Her breasts were totally normal if you read the autopsy report, and she was still wearing her underwear and she was in a t-shirt. So I'm not saying a sexual assault didn't happen of some kind, but it's hard to think that it did.
Yeah.
So we don't know. Well, okay, now this is the interesting part. So his mom and brother are living here. Suddenly, they moved to Texas without warning. They just pack up and leave. Just in the middle of this girl disappearing. They all just go to Texas. Okay. Well, what's interesting, in September of last year, before William gets arrested, I know for a fact that people who worked at the Mount Pleasant School, they for years had tried to tell the police. This is really weird that this younger brother just up and vanished.
Yeah. Like
he just left. So what I do know for a fact that they did talk to some of the people who worked at the school in mid to late September. And then by November, the first week of November, he's arrested in Oregon. So what does that tell you? Something happened during these conversations. I also know that Casey and some of the people in his family were interviewed in October. So what you can see is this wave building. Like something happens in July, they find something. Then in September, they go and interview some more people who are at the school. And then they interview the family, and then a couple weeks later, they got their guy. So we'll find out, hopefully.
Yeah. When's that trial supposed to pick back up?
The trial is supposed to start in August. I would be shocked if it did start on time, but that's tentatively scheduled for August.
So is that something you're going to be jumping on?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Cool. So that'll be a different show right there, different podcast.
Yeah.
Even for your podcast. So plug in your podcast real quick.
My podcast, mine and Andrew Brown's podcast, is called Diamond State Murder Board, and we cover murder cases. Once a week we go 3 weeks. We take a week off. We do that kind of thing. But we cover murder cases in Arkansas. We cover murder cases all over the country. I have a lot of connections to a lot of different cases, different people who've been involved in different cases in various capacities. So we try to bring on a guest or two every week and do that true crime thing.
That's great. I was going to ask you too. I don't know if you know this or not, but going back to, you said you can find her on Spotify. I want to make sure you cover all the bases.
You can find Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast. I guess that's what it's called.
I don't know what it is.
I always use Apple, so I don't know what the other platforms are.
Okay, so going back to William, why did you think did they give any reason why it took so long to find that guy?
Well, now they said that he was living in the Philippines and then he owned a plantation there. He worked on, I think he worked on like deep sea oil rigs all over the world. That was his job. So it made a lot of money.
Wow.
And so he had met a woman.
He drives an S10?
Yeah. Oh, no, he didn't. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, okay.
He had bought a brand new, is it Avalanche?
Mm-hmm.
He was driving a brand new Avalanche, I believe.
Avalanche, yeah. Okay.
So him being in this little S10 truck doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
And the only person that we've ever found a vehicle registration for was Casey owned an S10.
Yeah.
I'm not saying someone else didn't, but that's the only one we know of that's related to him.
Yeah.
So he was living overseas. He was living in the Philippines, met a woman. He had some kids here in the United States, but he went over there. He met some, I don't know if she was an escort or what. That's the story we were told. And he got her pregnant, and then he decided he was going to live in the Philippines. So he had a little farm there. And then finally he decided he wanted to buy a farm. He was in Oregon with his mom and brother, and they decided to buy a farm there. And we found the property records where it shows them buying some land. And the state police in their press release said, well, he was overseas, we couldn't get to him. But I know that that's not accurate because the guy had been in the U.S. since like January of last year.
Now, do you think money protected him, do you think?
No, I don't think he was on their radar really. I think that they had honed in on some other people in the case.
Yeah.
And maybe rightfully so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that. But, well, there's one guy they honed in on that it's ludicrous that they had honed in on him. But I think that they just found some new evidence and then they just played it out. Which is, that's good detective work.
Oh, that's what that's what I was going to ask you too. So, this evidence, the new evidence, did that come off the body?
We don't know. Now we've speculated that maybe they had found it in the truck.
Okay.
That maybe it was discovered originally in the like they processed the truck back in 2000. Okay. And when they went to re-examine some of it, this is a real phenomenon by the way.
Yeah.
They collect evidence and they know that they will never be able to find like answers now because of the science, but they know 15, 20 years later, if you keep that stuff in storage, they could maybe find it, like that fine mitochondrial DNA. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that maybe they just re-examined something they already had in the case file, and sure enough, something popped. Familial DNA. What does that mean? Yeah. It means it's someone who's related to McCulloughs. Obviously, first cousin would be related to him.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
So they found something off of him, and something that maybe would have been.
Well, not necessarily. They could have found something that. Found something from him, and maybe in the truck.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a piece of paper. Maybe there was like a print that had some genetic material on it.
Right.
So there's all sorts of possibilities. We don't know because they haven't released the full probable cause, which should have been released by now.
Yeah. I wonder what's taking so long.
Well, there's a phenomenon in Arkansas now where when there's a murder case, they just go to the judge and they gag it, which is totally wrong because that violates state laws.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, Ian. So we have a concept in our justice system in the United States and in Arkansas where let's say I think Ian's committed X crime. I'm a detective. I build my case. I collect all the evidence. I build the case against
before
Ian.
Before you confront him.
So I build my case against you. I might interview you during this process and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing about you committing X crime.
Right.
Well, then finally, once I'm confident that I've built a good enough case against you, I go to a judge. I get a warrant for your arrest.
Okay.
Once I arrest you, then the information.
And this person is told to stay put until I can get.
No.
Oh, they can leave.
No, they can leave. No, they're free. They're free. No, they don't have to do anything. So yeah, you can give them on the room and say, "Screw you, I'm out of here. Bye." But you can walk right out.
But that looks bad on you.
It could look bad, but you know what? You can do it.
Yeah.
And most of the guys that end up doing that, a lot of times don't get arrested for crimes because they go lawyer up and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So once the detective thinks he has a good enough case, he goes to a judge. They issue the warrant. Once the warrant is issued, the probable cause that was used to arrest you, every bit of it, the case, essentially, is a public document. So everything relating to William Miller should be a public document now. But at 10 o'clock in the morning, they arrest him on a Saturday, late Saturday night, early Sunday morning in Oregon. Monday morning, they have a hearing before anybody knows. The only person who had broken it was on the news. It hadn't made national news yet. The only person who had broken anything about it was me. I broke it to social media. at about 8:30 that morning, I said, he's been arrested in Oregon. They're not saying it yet. And then about an hour later, the state police said, we're going to have a press conference at noon. Well, at 9:45 that morning, they had a hearing to suppress everything in the case. Yeah, and the judge signed off on it. Now, what would happen is if someone would go and sue them, take them to court and say, you can't do this, it violates state law, and they would win. But you got to have people who've got money in pockets to go and do something.
Right. So, you said once his case is brought up, it's public record.
Yeah.
So that means the public can view it.
Yeah.
So, my question is, if, say I was an investigator, if I was a reporter, I mean, it's kind of investigating.
Yeah.
You know, you're digging.
Yeah.
Could you possibly find something in that public record that somebody might have overlooked, and you could have found something and brought it? Could you bring it up to whoever's running the case?
Oh, absolutely. I've done it before.
Okay.
In different cases. No, that's absolutely the case. And
Yeah.
here's the thing. Okay, so, and actually my partner Jennifer and I we're going to do a podcast episode on this. The number of podcasts that have helped solve crimes.
What? Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because like
sense.
there was a case out of
We could
California.
really pull up the record right now and
Yeah.
and overlook and have a whole podcast and we just reading it. I mean, boring
Yeah.
hell, but I mean,
There's that smart girl, the college girl in California that died back, I think it was 96.
Mhm.
I think it was Kristen Smart. Okay, there was a podcast about her case, and guess what happened?
they found
Within
new evidence.
a year or two, yeah, what it did is it just ignited a firestorm. Same thing happened in this case. Helen Gone,
Yeah.
like I'd written about it. I'd been in my books. I was on Helen Gone for like 6 episodes. Catherine and I talked about the case for years. After that podcast, it started a firestorm.
Yeah.
People went nuts. They're like, how is this not solved?
Mm-hmm.
And then it put pressure on the police, and then all of a sudden they switched investigators, and then this new investigator within 8 months has an arrest. He'd only been on the case 8 months before he arrested him. So he was on.
So he was on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, no, you can, no. The one detail that jumped out at me in the affidavit, and I told Jennifer this as soon as we got it, what they did is they didn't release the probable cause affidavit. They released a summary, which means they left key details out, like motive, why he did it, did anybody else know? Now, I think part of the reason they did that is maybe there's a corroborating witness that will testify at trial, and we don't know who that could be.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a multitude of speculation about who it could be. It could be someone in the family. It could be a friend. They didn't want to divulge their identity, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because it's a public record.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to. So, but yeah, no. Those podcasts. We came up with a list of several that you can draw a line. Not solved. Podcasts come out within 18 months solved.
Yeah.
And people getting madder and madder and madder. The podcast getting more and more popular because people are getting madder and madder and madder.
That is. So, who's getting mad if they're getting
People.
solved?
People. Like, okay, here's the thing. So before I started writing about Rebecca's case, it was virtually a forgotten case. No one ever talked about it. It was never in the newspapers. No one had ever heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
So then in 2016, I released my first book. I started talking about it. Well, I started doing interviews with magazines and newspapers and TV stations. And every time, they'll want to talk about the West Memphis Three.
By the way, I was on YouTube, and yes, I can confirm that you were on a bunch of interviews. I saw a bunch of them.
Yes.
It was very cool.
And so...
And you're very handsome.
Thank you. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
I don't get that much.
Yeah.
So I'm doing all these interviews, and I'm constantly talking about her case.
Okay.
And because I became friends with her dad at this point, and so it was kind of like, I want this solved. It seems pretty easy to solve. She got bonked on the head.
Yeah.
She was left on the side of the road to die. So then Catherine Townsend calls me, or emails me.
Mm-hmm.
As of one day, I'm sitting on my couch, 8 o'clock at night, get this email from Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, she's working for the Discovery Channel on their website. She writes stories for them.
Okay.
So she contacts me. She goes, I want to do a podcast about Rebecca Gould's murder. And I said, okay. And so I met with her and her producer in a little town here in Arkansas. And we sat down and did 2 or 3 hours worth of interviews. And then we did some follow-up interviews after that. But her and I became friends. We started talking about the case. So we spent months and months and months. Well, then finally, she puts her podcast together, and it was well done. I'm going to give them credit. Helen Gone was a well-done podcast.
Cool.
Became one of the most popular podcasts in the United States at the time. Dr. Oz brought Catherine and Dr. Gould on to do interviews. He did like a 45-minute segment on Rebecca's case. Well, what happens is I told Dr. Gould in 2016, he said, we're kind of at a dead end. He's like, what are we going to do to get my daughter's case solved? And he'd spent lots of money on private investigators. He had done all this stuff. He'd been writing letters to the prosecutor. He'd been fighting the good fight. There's nothing he could do. And I said, Dr. Gould, I said, the only thing I know of is the white, hot light of media scrutiny. Every day, just on TV, on podcasts. I said, pound. I said, that's all I know. In West Memphis 3, those guys would still be in prison. Davey Nichols might have been executed by now.
Yeah.
But it was just the unrelenting national pressure. Finally, it just broke. Like they had enough. You know, like the powers that be decided, okay, we've got to adjudicate this case somehow that satisfies the public, and they did. Same thing happened to Rebecca's case. I covered a case up in Gosnell back in 2011. They arrested a guy, and it was just clearly obvious he didn't have anything to do with this murder, but he had confessed to it. So everybody's like, well, he confessed.
It's pressure.
Yeah. And eventually, the science comes back, the DNA test the sperm cell that's found on this 11-year-old girl's body, and it's not this guy's sperm cell.
Yeah.
And it was just unrelenting pressure, and finally they got the right guy, Freddie Sharp III. Who was a neighbor who had little kids who played with her. He raped and killed her and threw her body in a ditch over around Hatton.
So you've been doing this obviously for a while. I can tell.
Yeah.
It shows. Thanks for coming on and showing
No problem.
and sharing the story. And I'm really glad that with you talking about so many different people that now that it kind of brought up to light and kind of put pressure on some people, and it came out to light. That's really cool and unselfish.
Yeah, it works.
Really cool.